Hello. It's got to have started by now. Hello. Hello.
Hello, from the Village Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading the Bible, then we are going to be doing synopsis. Then we are going to have a special thing tonight with Kim, and then we are going to be doing Brian song.
A special thing with Kim?
Yeah.
We'll have to find out what that is.
I don't even know what that is.
All right. So we're going to read Colossians 3.
Pajamas.
And okay, so there it is. There's Colossians 3. One of my favorite chapters in the New Testament, definitely in the top 100 or so. So here we go. Yes. Before I get started, I wanted to ask you to make a comment in the comments. And I was going to ask this last night, but by the time that it cut out on my, because I was listening to it on my headset downstairs, and by the time that it cut out on my headset, we'd already stopped the live stream, so I couldn't say that. So please make a comment in the comments if you think that I need to stop my theological ramblings after I read. Please don't do that. I've already posted it. After I read the Bible passage. So if you think that I need to stop my theological ramblings, then please post a comment. If you don't think that I need to stop my theological ramblings, then please post a comment. All right. So Daniel, be quiet. Okay, Becca's not on yet. It's Granny Bear.
But I was going to say, I have a special thing for Becca. I want her to know what she thinks one of the fire lizards looks like.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So if she watches that part, then maybe she will. But if she doesn't, then maybe we can remind her before we start the story. JJ, you're supposed to change into pajamas, right? All right. Colossians chapter 3. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible. The link is already in the comments. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who was your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrongdoer, for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. One more verse into chapter 4. Masters, treat your bondservants justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Okay, I want to just read this verse over again. It seems like when I start reading the Bible, that's when all the cacophony around me starts going, but I want to read this one verse in case you missed it. There is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. That sounds to me like all lives matter. That's how I read Paul. I don't know. I'm not trying to make a political statement, just that's the way I read it. All right, so back away a little bit. Here we go.
Same way you... Where's the pillow?
I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I didn't put it there.
Can you go get it for me?
I don't know where it is.
You got it? JJ got it? Okay. So I figured it out. Dad likes to have the computer screen the same way he likes to have the steering wheel here. And this is a really hard chair, like really old. I think we need to just retire it, but it's a chair, so.
It is a chair.
So how's everybody doing tonight?
Stand up, Mom.
I know Becca's working on science. Thank you, JJ. Thank you. Nice and soft. All right, go settle.
Okay.
Oh. Sorry.
JJ. I can still hear it. Okay.
I know.
All right, so we're going to read chapter 5 of Dragon Song, but
I haven't done the special thing.
we need to do the special thing with Kim first, and Kim is going to give us a synopsis, I hope. Kimberly B.
Okay, it's just now to the point where you sat down. On the skipping.
Use the one on
You're right. Dad loves it too far. First, do the synopsis.
No, do the special thing.
Okay. So, one time when I was watching one of my favorite movies, I decided that I would play the main theme on my viola, and then I translated it to recorder. Okay.
What is the synopsis?
So basically what happened in the last few chapters is they went on about how her family didn't want her to sing, how the new Harper came along, and he had heard about her, but the old Harper never told him that it was a her. So he was just like, whenever he's ready, he'll appear. And so
her family basically made her not play, and she had hurt her hand when she was like doing a chore, and
She's gutting fish.
yeah, she was gutting fish and she hurt her hand, and so her mom stitched it up and everything, and then she's like, will I never be able to play? And her mom's like, even if your hand is well enough to play, you're never gonna play again. Yeah, if my mom did that,
I would never do that.
yeah, mom would never do that. But if I had a mom as heartless as that, I probably would have rebelled at age 5.
I'm playing with it. I'm trying to decide where the glare is coming from.
So
Yeah, that's better.
So then she stumbled upon the fire lizards, and no,
What happened with that?
she helped them get the eggs away from the ocean so that they wouldn't drown. They wouldn't drown. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
So then she befriends the fire lizards, and after another run-in, she runs out of the house like 2 days later because the day before that it was raining or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So then the thread is falling, so that's coincidentally the same day as the fire lizards hatch. So she had picked up a bunch of food and she fed all the fire lizards before they could, well, most of them before they could go into the thread and like die. I was thinking that maybe like they fed on the thread, which would be very useful in their environment. I don't know, Dad.
So that's where we are?
No, she decided she's gonna stay with the fire lizards. That's basically what happened after that, right? Yeah, and the fire lizards actually appreciate her talent.
Ah, yes. Okay. So, I'm back. Here is my trusty buddy.
Yeah. He's
Okay, JJ's my other trusty buddy, but okay. No, not that one, please. That's my fire lizard. All right. Okay, so chapter 5. O tongue, give sound to joy and sing of hope and promise on dragon wing. No one, as usual, noticed Meneley when she got back to the hold. Dutifully, she saw the harbor master and told him about the tides. Didn't I read this? Oops. Okay. That was chapter 5. Sorry. Chapter 6. Whew. Okay. Okay. All right. Lord of the hold, your charge is sure in thick walls, metal doors, and no vendor. Birder. Threadfall was well past, the flamethrower crew safely back at Half Circle Hold before anyone missed Meneley. Salah did because she didn't want to have to tend to old uncle. He had had another seizure and someone had to stay by his bedside. It's about all she's good for now anyway, Salah told Mavi, and then hastily demurred at her mother's stern look. Well, all she does is drag about, cradling that hand of hers as if it were precious. She gets off all the real work. Sulla let out a heavy sigh. We've enough trouble this morning, what with someone leaving the hold doors unfastened and thread falling. Mavi shuddered at the thought of the brace of horrors. The mere notion of thread cascading down, able to wriggle within the hold, turned her stomach. Go find Meneley and see that she knows what to do in case the old man has another fit. It took Sella the better part of an hour to realize that Meneley was neither in the hold nor among those baiting longlines. She hadn't been among the flamethrower crews. In fact, no one could remember having seen or spoken to her all day. She couldn't have been out hunting greens like she usually does, said the old auntie thoughtfully, pursing her lips. Threadfall was on directly we'd our morning claw. Didn't see her in the kitchen then either, And she's usually so good about helping, one-handed in all that she is, poor dear. At first, Sella was just annoyed. So, like Menely, to be absent when needed, Mavi was a good deal too lenient with the child. Well, if she'd not been in the hold in the morning, she'd been caught out in the thread, and that served her right. What kind of mom? Okay, I never mind. I might say served her right occasionally. Um, then Stella wasn't so sure. She began to feel the first vestige of fright. If Menely had been out during Threadfall, surely there'd be something left that Thread couldn't eat. Gulping back nausea at the thought, she sought out her brother Alamai, who was in charge of the flamethrowers. Alamai, you didn't see anything unusual when you were ground checking. What do you mean by unusual? You know, traces of what? I've no time for riddles now, Salah. I mean, if someone were caught out during Threadfall, how would you know? Whatever are you talking about? Menelie's nowhere in the hold, or in the dock, or anywhere. She wasn't on any of the teams. Alamai frowned. No, she wasn't, but I thought Mavi needed her in the hold for something. There! And none of the aunties remember seeing her this morning. And the hold doors were unbarred. You think Menelie left the hold early? Alamai realized that a strong, tall girl like Menelie could very easily have managed the door bars. You know how since she hurt her hand, creeping away every chance she gets. Alamai did know, for he was fond of the gawky sister, and he particularly missed her singing. He didn't share Giannis's reservations about Menelie's ability, and he didn't honestly agree with Giannis's decision to keep knowledge of it from the Harper, especially now that there was a Harper in the hold to keep her in line. Well, Stella's prompting irritated him out of his thoughts. I saw nothing unusual. Would there be something if Thread did get her? Alamai gave Stella a long, hard look. She sounded as if she'd be glad if Melanie, maybe only one chapter tonight. Meneley did get threaded. There'd be nothing left as she'd been caught by Thread, but no Thread got caught or got through the Bendon wings. With that, he turned on his heel and left his sister mouth agape. His reassurance was curiously no consolation to Stella. However, since Meneley was so obviously missing, Stella could take some pleasure in informing Mavi of this fact, adding her theory that Meneley had committed the enormous crime of leaving the hold doors unbarred. Meneley? Mavi was handing out sea salt and spice root to the head cook when Stella imparted her news. Meneley? Yes, Meneley. She's gone and not been seen, and she's the one that left the hold doors unbarred. With Thread falling. Thread wasn't falling when Giannis discovered the doors open, Mavi corrected Stella mechanically. She shuddered at the thought of anyone, even a recalcitrant daughter, caught out in the silvery rain of Thread. Mom, what does recalcitrant mean, please? Alamai said no Thread got through the dragons, but how can he be sure? Mavi said nothing as she looked okay. Mavi said nothing as she locked up the condiment press and spun the rollers. I'll inform Giannis. And I'll have a word with Alamai too. You'd better take care of old uncle. Me? Not that that's real work, but it is suited to your temperament and ability. Snap. Giannis was silent for a long moment when he heard of Meneley's disappearance. He didn't like untoward things happening, such as the hold doors being left unbarred. He'd worried about that all during the fall and the fishing after the fall. It wasn't good for a seaholder to have his mind diverted from the task at hand. He felt some relief that the mystery had been solved and a keen annoyance and anxiety about the girl. Foolish thing for her to have done, leave the hold that early. She'd been sulking ever since that beating. Mavi hadn't kept her busy enough to make her forget the nonsense of tuning. I've heard that there are plenty of caves in the cliffs along the coast, Elgian said. The girl probably took shelter in one. She probably did, said Mavi briskly, grateful to the Harper for such a sensible suggestion. Menely knows the coast very well. She must know every crevice by now. She'll be back then, Giannis said. Give her time to get over the fright of being out during Threadfall. She'll be back. Giannis found relief in the theory and turned to less distressing business. It is spring, said Mavi, more to herself than the others. Only the harper caught the anxious note in her voice. 2 days later, Menely had not returned, and the entire sea hold was alerted to her disappearance. No one remembered seeing her on the day of Threadfall. No one had seen her since. Children sent out for berries or spider claws had encountered no trace of her, nor had she been in any of the caves they knew. Not much point in sending out a search, said one of the shipmasters, mindful that there was more surety of catching fish than finding any trace of a foolish girl, particularly one with a crippled hand. Either she's safe and doesn't choose to come back, or she could be hurt, thread scored, a broken leg or arm, said Alamai, unable to make her way back. Perhaps shouldn't have been out anyway without letting someone know where she'd gone. Now I do have to advocate for that. Don't ever leave the house without telling me or dad where you are going or asking permission is better. But
Yeah, but they should not have treated her that
they
way.
shouldn't have treated her that way. You're correct. Okay.
I would have run away.
Yeah, but she might be surprised to know that all of them are looking for her. The shipmaster's eyes moved towards Mavi, who did not catch this implied negligence on her part. She was used to going out for greens first thing in the morning, Alamai said. If no one else would defend Menely, he would speak up. Did she carry a belt knife or a metal buckle? Asked Elgin. Thread doesn't touch metal. Aye, we'd find that much of her, said Giannis. If Thread got her, said the shipmaster darkly, he rather favored the notion that she'd fallen into a crevice or over the edge of the bluff in terror at finding herself out during Threadfall. Her body'd wash up around the Dragonstones. Current throws up a lot of sea trash down that way. Mavi caught her breath in a sound very like a sob. I don't know the girl, Elgin said quickly. Elgin's the harper. Seeing Mavi's distress, but if she did, as you say, stay out a good deal of the time, she'd know the land too well to go over the edge of a cliff. Threadfall's enough to rattle anyone's wits, said the shipmaster. Menely was not stupid, and said Alamai with such feeling that everyone looked at him in surprise, and she knew that her teaching well enough to know what to do if she were caught out. Right, enough, Alamai, said Giannis sharply and rose to his feet. If she were able and of a mind to return, she'd have done so. Everyone who was abroad is to keep a sharp eye for any trace of her. That includes sea as well as land. As sea holder, I cannot, in conscience, do more than that under the circumstances. And the tide is making. So the boats now. Do you have something to show us?
You can't see. Oh,
Yep.
here, let me.
I got it. What is it?
It's the queen.
Oh, it's the
Queen
Queen
Fire
Fire Lizard.
Lizard.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Okay. Hi, Chrissy.
Not.
Okay. All right. Everybody settle back down, please. While Elgion did not actually expect the Seaholder to institute an intensive search for a lost girl, he was surprised at the decision. Mavi even accepted it, almost as if she were glad of an excuse, as if the girl were an embarrassment. The shipmaster was obviously pleased by his Seaholder's impartiality. Only Alamai betrayed resentment. The harper motioned to the young man to hang back as the others filed out. I've some time. Where would you suggest I look? Hope flashed in Alamai's eyes. Then as suddenly weariness clouded them. I'd say it's better if Menely remains where she is. Dead or hurt? Aye, Alamai replied deeply. And I wish her luck and long life. Then you think she's alive and chooses to be without hold? Alamai regarded the harper quietly. I think she's alive and better off wherever she is than she would be in Half Circle. Then the young seaman strode after the others, leaving the harper with some interesting reflections. He was not unhappy at Half Circle Hold, but the master harper had been correct in thinking that Elgion would have to make quite a few adjustments to life in the sea hold. It would be a challenge, Robinson had told Elgin, to try to broaden the narrow outlook and straighten thinking. Somebody please keep track of how many word flubs I'm having. I'm having an off day. uh, to try to broaden the narrow outlook and straighten thinking of this isolated group. At the moment, Elgin wondered if the Master Harper had not vastly overrated his abilities when he was unable to get the sea holder or his family to even try to rescue a blood relation. Then, shifting through the tones of voices rather than the words spoken, Elgin came to realize that this mentally posed some sort of problem to her hold beyond the crippled hand. For the life of him, Elgin couldn't remember seeing the girl, though he thought he could recognize every member of the hold. He'd spent considerable time now with every family unit and the children of the in the little hall, with the active fishermen and with the honorably retired old people. Just a second. JJ, please go lay down in your bed. Okay, he's with that. Okay. He tried to recall when he'd seen a girl with injured hand and had only the fleetingest recollection of a tall, gawky figure hurrying out of the hall one evening when he'd been playing. He hadn't seen the girl's face, but he'd recall her slumping figure as if he saw it again. It was regrettable that Half Circle Hold was so isolated that there was no way to send a drum message. He could signal the next dragon rider he saw as an alternative and get word to Bend and Weir. The sweep riders could keep their eyes open for the girl and alert any holds beyond the marshes and down the coast. How she could have gotten that far with thread falling, Elgin didn't know, but he'd feel better taking some measures to find her. He had also made no headway in discovering the identity of the song maker. The Master Harper had charged him to have that lad in the Harper Craft Hall for training as soon as possible. Gifted song makers were a rare commodity, something to be sought and cherished. By this time, Elgin understood why the old Harper had been so cautious about identifying the lad. Giannis thought only of the sea, of fishing, of how to use every man, woman, and child of his sea hold to the hold's best advantage. He had them all well trained. Giannis would certainly have looked askance at any able bodied lad who spent too much time tuning. There was, in fact, no one to help Elgin with the evening task of entertainment. One likely lad had a fair sense of rhythm, and Elgin had already started him on the drum. But the majority of his students were thick fingered. Oh, they knew their teachings spot on, but they were passive musically. No wonder Petrian had been so effusive about the one really talented child among so many deadheads. Too bad the old man had died before he received Robinson's message. That way, the boy would have known that he was more than acceptable as a candidate to the Harper Craft Hall. Elgin watched the fishing fleet out of the harbor and then rounded up several lads, got meat rolls from an auntie in the hold kitchen, and set off on ostensibly to a food gathering mission. Okay. As Harper, he was acquainted with them, but mindful that he was the Harper, the boys regarded him with respect and kept him at a distance. The moment he told them that they should keep their eyes open for Menely, for her belt knife, if they knew it, or belt buckle, the distance widened inexplicably. They all seemed to know, though Elgin doubted that the adults had told them that Menely had been missing from the hold for some days. They all seemed equally reluctant to look for her, or to suggest to him possible areas in which to search. If it was as if Elgin told himself with frustrated anger they were afraid the Harper would find her. So he tried to regain their confidence by telling them that Giannis had suggested that everyone who went outside the hold should keep their eyes open for the lost girl. He came back with his charges to the hold with sacks full of berries, greens, and some spider claws. The only information the boys had volunteered about Menely during the entire morning was that she could catch more spider claws than anyone. As it turned out, Elgin didn't have to signal for a dragon rider. The next day, a bronze wing leader came circling down to the beach at Half Circle, greeting Giannis affably and asking if he might have a few words with the Harper. You'll be Elgin, said the young man, raising his hand in greeting. I'm Natan, rider of Leoth. I heard you were settling in. What can I do for you, Natan? Said Elgian tactfully, walking the bronze rider out of Giannis's earshot. You've heard of fire lizards? Elgian stared at Natan in surprise for a moment before he laughed. That old myth? Not really a myth, friend, said Natan, despite laughing mischief in his eyes. He was speaking in earnest. Not a myth? Not at all. Would you know if the lads here have spotted any along the coast? They tend to leave their clutches in beach sands. If the eggs, it's the eggs we want. Really? Actually, it isn't the lads who've seen them, but the Seaholder's son, not the fanciful sort, although I didn't really credit. He saw some around some rock crags down, known as the Dragonstones, down the coast some ways. Algian pointed the direction. I'll go have a look myself, but this is what has happened. Fenor, Brown Camp's rider, has been injured. Natan paused. He's been convalescing at Southern Hold. He found and impressed, and again Natan paused significantly to emphasize the last word, a fire lizard queen. Impressed? I thought only dragons. Fire lizards are much like dragons, only smaller, but this would mean, said Elgian, as he was lost in the wonder of that meaning. Yes, precisely, Harper, said Natan with a wide grin. And now everyone wants a fire lizard. I can't imagine Giannis Seaholder wasting the time and energy of his men looking for fire lizard clutches. But if fire lizards have been seen, any cove with warm sand might just hide a clutch. The high tides this spring have been flooding most of the coves. Too bad. See if you can't organize the Hold youngsters to search. I don't think you'd have much resistance. None at all, said Elgian, as he realized that Natan Dragonrider, though he was, must have been susceptible to the same boyhood designs on the fire lizards that Elgian had once planned. When we find a clutch, what do we do? If you find one, Natan said, fly the signal banner and the sweep rider will report. If the tide is threatening, put the clutch in either warm sand or warmed hides. If they should hatch, you did mention they can be impressed. I hope that you're that lucky, Harper. Feed the fledglings. Stuff their faces with as much as they can eat, talking all the time. That's how you impress. But then you've been to a hatching, haven't you? So you know how to go about it. Same principle involved. Fire lizards. Elgian was enchanted with the prospect. Don't impress them all, Harper. I'd like one of the little beasties myself. Greedy? No, they're engaging little pets. Nothing as intelligent as my Leoth there. And Natan grinned indulgently at his bronze, who was scrubbing one cheek in the sand. As he turned back to Elgian, Natan noticed the line of awed children lining the seawall, all eyes on Leoth's action. You'll have no lack of help, I suspect. Speaking of help, wing leader, a young girl of the Seahold is missing. She went out the morning of the last fall and hasn't been seen since. Natan whistled softly and nodded sympathetically. I'll tell the sweep riders that she probably took shelter if she'd any sense. Those palisades are riddled with caves. How far have you searched? That's it. No one has bothered to. Natan scowled and glanced toward the Seaholder. How old a girl? Come to think of it, I don't know. His youngest daughter, I believe. Natan snorted. There are other things in life than fish. So I used to believe. Don't be so sour, so young, and Elgian. I'll see you. I'll see you come to the next hatching at Bendon. I'd appreciate that. I suspect so. With a farewell wave, Natan strode back to his bronze dragon, leaving Elgian with an easier conscience and the prospect of some relief from the monotony of the Seahold. That was chapter 6. It's only 34 minutes in. Kimberly just offered to read. I'll read another chapter. Let me see how long it is. Okay, it's not long at all. It's less than 10 pages. We'll go ahead and read it. What is everybody crowding around me for? Put your pajamas on. Nah. Nah. Hey. It's sleepy time tea. It's not claw. That would be cool. I have a feeling claw is like either, okay. I have a feeling claw is, obviously it's like coffee or tea, but I would love to try some someday. Chapter 7, who wills can, who tries does, who loves lives. It took Meneley 4 days to find the right sort of rocks to spark a fire. She'd had plenty of time before that to dry seaweed and gather dead marshberry bushes for fuel, and to build a little hearth in the side of the big cavern where a natural chimney took the smoke up. She'd gathered a generous pile of sweet marsh grasses for bedding, and picked out the seam of the carry sack to make herself a rug. It wasn't quite long enough unless she curled up under it, but the fire lizards insisted on sleeping about and around her, and their bodies made up for the lack. In fact, she was quite comfortable at night. With fire, she was very comfortable. She found a stand of young clarebark trees, and though the resultant brew was harsh, it woke her up very well. She went to the clay deposits that Half Circle Hold used and got sufficient clay to make herself several cups, plates, and rude containers for storage, which she hardened in the ashes of her fire, as she filled in the holes of the dish like porous rock in which she could boil water. With all the fish she needed in the sea in front of her, she ate as well as, if not better than, she would have in the hold, although she did miss bread. She even made herself a sort of path down the cliff face. She carved out footholds and staked in some handholds to make both ascent and descent safer. And she had company. 9 fire lizards were constantly in attendance. The morning after her hectic adventure, Meneley had been absolutely stunned to wake up with the unaccustomed weight of warm bodies about her. Scared, too, until the little creatures roused with strong thoughts of renewed hunger and love and affection for her. Driven by their need, she had climbed down the treacherous rock face to the sea and gathered fingertails, trapped in the shallow tidal pools. She wasn't quite able to dig rock mites, but when she showed her charges where they could get them out with their long, agile tongues, the creatures found their instinct adequate for the job. Having fed her friends, Meneley was too tired to go in search of sparking rocks, and had eaten a flat fish raw. Then she and the fire lizards had crept back into the cavern and slept again. As the days went by, their appetite drove Meneley to the lengths she wouldn't have attempted for her own comfort. The result was that she was kept entirely too busy to feel either sorry for or apprehensive about herself. Her friends had to be fed, comforted, and amused. She also had to supply her own needs as far as she was able, and she was able to do a lot more than she'd suspected she could. In fact, she began to wonder about a lot of things the Hold took for granted. She had automatically assumed, as she supposed everyone did, that to be caught without shelter during Threadfall was tantamount to dying. No one had ever correlated the fact that the dragon riders cleared most of the thread from the skies before it fell. That was the whole point of having dragons, with the idea that as a result there was very little thread to fall on the unsheltered. Hold thinking had hardened into an inflexible rule. To have no shelter during Threadfall was to experience death. In spite of her increasing independence, however, had Meneley been alone, she might have regretted her foolishness and crept back to the sea hold. But the company and wonder of the fire lizards gave her all the diversion she needed, and they loved her music. It was no great trick at all to make one reed pipe, and a lot more fun to put 5 together so that she could play a counter tune. The fire lizards adored the sounds and would sit listening, their dainty heads rocking in time with the music she played. When she sang, they'd croon, at first off key, but gradually, she thought, their ear improved, and she had a soft chorus. Meneley sang in amused duty all the teaching ballads, particularly the ones about dragons. The fire lizards might understand less than a child 3 turns old, but they responded with small cries and flapping wings to any of the dragon songs, as if they appreciated the fact that she was singing about their kin. There was no doubt in Meneley's mind that these lovely creatures were related to the huge dragons. How, she didn't know and didn't really care. But if you treated them the way Weirmen treated their dragons, the fire lizards responded. She, in turn, began to understand their moods and needs, and insofar as she was able, supplied them. They grew quickly those first days, so quickly that she was hard pressed to keep their mouths full. Manily didn't see too much of the other hatchlings, the ones that she hadn't fed or had only fed casually. She was she was them she saw them now and again, smaller creatures, as the entire weir fed on the rock mites at low tide. The little queen and her bronze mate would often hover, watching Menely and her small group. The queen sometimes scolded Menely, or perhaps berated the fire lizard Menely was holding. Menely wasn't sure which. And occasionally, the queen would even fly at one of the fledglings, beating it soundly with her wings. For that reason, Menely could never figure out, but the little ones meekly submitted to her discipline. Occasionally, Menely offered food to one of the others, but they'd never take it if she remained near, nor would any of the older fire lizards, including the queen. Menely concluded that that was as well. Otherwise, she'd have to spend every single waking moment feeding lazy fire lizards. The 9 she'd impressed were quite enough to keep sated. When she saw the first skin lesion on the little queen, Menely wondered where she would find oil. They'd all need it. Cracks in the skin would be deadly for the young fire lizards if they had to go between. And with natural enemies around like weirs and eager boys from nearby holds, between was a needed refuge. The closest source of oil swam in the sea, but she'd no bait to catch the deep sea oily fishes. So she searched the coast for dead fish and found a packtail washed up during the night. She slit the carcass carefully, always working the knife blade away from her, and squeezed the oil from the skin into a cup. Not the most pleasant of jobs, and by the time she'd finished, she'd had a bare cupful of unpleasantly fishy smelling yellow oil. Yet it did work. The queen might not smell very pleasant, but the oil did coat the crack. For good measure, she smeared all her friends. The stench in the cavern that night was almost more than she could endure, and she fell asleep trying to think of alternatives. By morning, the possibilities had narrowed down to one: sweetening the fish oil with certain marsh grasses. She couldn't get the pure sweet oil they used in the hold because that was traded from Nerat. It was pressed from the flesh of a hot climate fruit that grew abundantly in the rainforests there. The oily seed pod that grew from the sea bush would not be available until fall, and while she could get some oil from black marshberries, it would take immense quantities, which she'd prefer to eat. With her fire lizards as winged escort, she made her way south and inland towards country little penetrated by the sea holders as being too far these days from shelter. Menely set out as soon as the sun was up and varied her pace between a striding walk and an easy jog. She decided to go on as far as she could until the sun was mid-heaven. She couldn't risk being too far from her cave when night fell. The fire lizards were excited, darting about until she scolded them for wasting their energy. They took enough feeding without all that flying, and all they could count on this flat marsh area were berries and a few early sour plums. They took turns clinging to her shoulders and hair then, until the little brown pulled at her once too often, and she shooed them all off. She was soon past any familiar terrain and began to proceed more slowly. It wouldn't do to be bogged down. Midday found her deep in the marshes, gathering berries for herself, her friends, and her basket. She'd managed to harvest some of the aromatic grasses she wanted, but not enough for her purpose. She had decided to sweep in a wide circle back toward her cliff cave when she heard distant cries. The little queen heard them too, landing on Menely's shoulder and adding her agitated comments. Menely told her to be quiet so she could hear, and to her surprise, the little queen instantly obeyed. The others subsided, and all seemed to wait expectantly. Without division, Menely recognized the distinctive and frantic notes of a distressed weary. Following the sound, Menely crossed the slight rise into the next bog valley and saw the creature, wings flapping, head jerking, but its legs and body firmly captured by treacherous sinking sands. Oblivious to the excitement of the fire lizards, who recognized the Weary as an enemy, Menely ran forward, drawing her knife. The bird had been eating berries from the bushes edging the boggy sands and stupidly stepped into the mire. Menely approached the sands cautiously, making certain that she was stepping on firm land. She got close enough. The frightened bird was not even aware of her proximity and plunged her knife into its back at the base of the neck. That is some survival, y'all. That's a lot. Okay. She's 15. Kimmy's going to be 15 next month. Okay. One more frightened squawk, and the thing was dead, limp wings settling on the surface and rapidly submerging. Mentally unbuckled her belt to make a loop of the buckle end. Grabbing the tough branches of a berry bush, she leaned out just far enough to snap the loop around the head of the bird. She tightened the loop and slowly began to pull. Sorry. Now, not only was there weary meat here to feed herself and the fire lizards, but the layer of fat under its rough hide would provide her with the best possible grease for her friends' fragile skins. Again, to Menely's surprise, the fire lizard queen appeared to understand the situation. She sank her tiny talons into a weary wing and pulled the tip out of the mud. She squeaked shrilly at the others, and before Menely realized that all of them had seized some tendable part of the Weary and were exerting their efforts to pull it from the bog sand. It took a lot of pulling and shrill fire lizard orders, but they managed to get the Weary out of the sands and onto firm ground. The rest of her day was spent in sawing through the tough outer hide to disembowel and dress the carcass. The fire lizards made an enthusiastic meal of the entrails and the blood that flowed from the Weary's neck. The sight somewhat nauseated Menely, but she set her jaw and tried to ignore the voracity with which her otherwise gentle companions attacked the unexpected delicacy. She hoped the taste of hot raw meat wouldn't change their temperaments, but she reckoned that dragons didn't become savage from their diet of live meat, so it was fair to assume that the fire lizards wouldn't. At least they were well fed for the day. The Weary had been a good-sized bird, doubtless feeding somewhere in the lower reaches of Narat, for its fatty layer was juicy. It couldn't be a northern bird. Mentally skinned it, stopping twice to hone her knife sharp. She carved the meat from the bones, stuffing it into the hide to carry home. When she had finished, she had a hefty burden, and the bones were by no means stripped clean. Too bad she couldn't tell the old queen where they were. She was rigging a forehead sling to her belt and from her belt, and the leg skin when suddenly the air was alive with fire lizards. With creels of shrill delight, the old queen and her bronzes settled on the bones. Mentally backed hastily away before the fire lizards decided to attack her for the meat she carried. She had plenty of time on her long and tiring march back to the sea cave to wonder about their appearance. She could easily believe that the little queen could understand what she was thinking, and the others she had been taking care of. But had the young queen told the others, or had Mentally some tenuous contact with the old queen too? Her special group showed no inclination to remain with the others, but kept her company, sometimes disappearing or making lazy figures in the sky. Sometimes the little queen sat on her shoulder for a few dragon lengths, chirruping sweetly. It was fully dark long before Mentally reached her refuge. Only the moonlight and familiarity with the access route helped her down the cliff face. Her hearth fire was sullen embers, which she wearily coaxed into a cheery blaze. She was too tired to do more than wrap a piece of weary meat in a few leaves of seaweed and stick it in the heated sands by the fire to cook for the morning. Then she wrapped herself up in her carry sack and fell asleep. I would have bathed. She rendered the fat over the next several days, wishing time and again for one decent cooking pot. She heaped aromatic herbs into the hot fat and poured the mixture into clay pots for cooling. The weary meat had a slightly fishy taste, which suggested that the stupid bird had been of a seaside flock rather than an inland or mountain group. But the cool degrees smelled of the herbs. Not mentally supposed that the fire lizards minded how they smelled so long as their itching skin was soothed. They loved to be oiled, lying on their backs, their wings spread for balance, curling around her hand as she spread oil on their softer belly hide. They hummed with delight at the attention, and when she finished each one, the creature would stroke her cheek with its small triangular head, the glistening eyes sparkling with brilliant colors. She was beginning to find individual traits among her 9 charges. The little queen was exactly as she should be, into everything, bossing everyone else, and imperious and demanding as a seal holder. She'd listened, however, very quietly to Meneley, and she'd listened to the old queen too, but she paid no heed to any of the others, although they were expected to obey anything she said. She'd peck them fast enough if they disobeyed her. There were 2 bronzes, 3 browns, a blue, and 2 greens. Meneley felt a little sorry for the blue. He seemed to be left out or picked upon by the others. The 2 greens were always scolding him. She named him Uncle, and the greens became Auntie 1 and Auntie 2. 2 was slightly smaller than 1 because one of the bronzes preferred to hunt for rock mites, while the other was deft into diving into pools for fingertails. They became Rocky and Diver. The Browns were so much alike that for a long time they remained nameless, but gradually she found that the largest of the trio usually fell asleep, given any opportunity to do so, so she called him Lazy Bones. The second was Mimic because he always did what he saw the others doing, and the third was Brownie for lack of any other distinguishing feature. The little queen was Beauty because she was and because she took such elaborate pains with her grooming and required much more attention and oiling than the others. She was forever digging at her talons with her teeth, spreading them to clean between the toes, or licking any specks of dust from her tail, burnishing her neck ridges of the sand or grass. At first, Meneley talked to her creatures to hear the sound of her own voice. Later, she spoke with them because they seemed to understand what she was saying. They certainly gave every indication of intelligent listening, humming or crooning, or encouraging response when she paused. And they never seemed to get enough of her singing to them or playing her pipes. She couldn't exactly say that they harmonized with her, but they did hum softly in tune as she played. And that is the end of chapter 7. Tomorrow we will try to read chapter 8 and maybe 9 too. The first word of chapter 8 is wheel, as in like not we will, but like as in like on a vehicle. Actually, I think this is a verb. Yes, it is a verb. So to wheel. Kimmy, I have an idea. I think you need to draw a close-up picture of a fire lizard's face, maybe just like half of one, like a profile picture or something, with their many colored eyes. And like apparently it's not like one color, it's like they're whirling in colors, kind of like hypnotically. So I think you should do that. Okay, so next chapter is about 12 pages, 10 pages. No, that's enough for tonight. We've been on for 53 minutes, and I'm just kind of like tootling a bit because I know that the live stream is a little bit behind what I'm actually saying. So I guess I could read the comments. Only about a 30-second delay. Why would you wait until age 5? I don't remember what that's about. Wait, what did you say? I can't. Oh, Kimmy would have rebelled at age 5. That's great. I have rebellious children. Let's not speak that. So, thank you for joining us all tonight for Dragon Song and our nightly Bible reading. We really appreciate everybody that came to watch, which is usually Grady Bear and Rebecca, and that's okay because it's good to stay connected to family. And now we're going to make sure everybody gets to bed and gets to sleep, and I get to go have me time, which means crochet, and get ready for homeschool tomorrow. And if everybody didn't know already, we're homeschooling JJ. Daniel's going to Safe Haven, and Kimberly is doing the online school here at home. So got it all. Any ideas what we want to read next? Twice Freed if we can find it. I don't know when, but I really want to start Lord of the Rings after Christmas. So what do we want to read for Christmas then? All right, well, anyway, I will let you all go and I will say good night. Do you want to say good night?
Good night.
Good night, y'all.
JJ, come on.